degree is in clinical mental health counseling. That is.
Thank you.
So in short, I'm a therapist. So I'm primarily going to focus on mental health, but also, since I'm a nerd, I'm going to give you like a little bit of like neuroscience type of information. Anybody familiar with like what epigenetics is? Ever heard of that? Show of hands. Okay. So epigenetics is understood. We can picture like a DNA helix, like the double helix, and we kind of sometimes think that we have bad genes or this runs in my family and I got a rare genetic condition or X, Y, and Z. Epigenetics is how your genes respond to your environment. Okay, so epi is like the outside or top layer, and then genetics is your core code is indestructible, and it responds to the environment, and that's how we get certain things like eye color, hair color, skin color, but also disease, cancer, diabetes, mental health challenges as well. Okay, we don't have defective genes. We do have environments that are toxic, no matter if it's family or community or societies or jobs or governments. We have a toxic society. Okay. Mental health in general is the way I like to describe it. At one point in my life, I needed a particular set of coping skills in order to survive. And in terms of therapy, we would think that and assume that that is adaptive, that is helpful, that is something that we need. We are beautifully and brilliantly made by our Creator, and the fact that we can survive difficult situations and experiences is helpful. But when we no longer have any utility for those coping skills, we got mental health problems. I'm applying a adaptive coping strategy to something that it does not apply to, something that it's not going to work for, that it's not going to be a good fit for. And much of the time, that's all that's in our tool belt. Anybody ever been to therapy?
Yeah.
Okay. So therapy, we're coming to learn new skills, new tools, process our experiences and gain language, but also understanding to what our experiences are. Okay? Mental health specifically, all mental health disorders do not unfold in a genetic, person-centered space. Mental health problems, mental health diagnoses occur in interpersonal dynamics. So in order to diagnose someone, in order for someone to qualify for a diagnosis, something happened between them and another person, them and their environment, them and their society. So a lot of times we kind of have like a negative connotation to mental health. This person's crazy, this person's, got this stuff going on, and we kind of demonize the person or reject the person, and then they have that internalized as a trauma. For Black people, I'm going to use like some Black language, we say we have generational curses, right? And you can kind of look at the language as an implication for how we have internalized our trauma as we are cursed, we are defective, something is wrong with us, we are bad. I prefer, as a Black therapist, to shift that and more of like a positive reframing to we have transgenerational trauma. It's passed down from generation to generation. When you go to your doctor and your doctor's saying, hey, does diabetes run in your family? Does this run in your family? What's going on? They're looking for the same stuff that clinical counselors are looking for. What are the patterns in your relationship? Everybody sat around the same table, ate the same food, had the same stressors, things of that nature going on. That's impacting our genes and how they are expressed. Okay? The primary function of the human brain is to survive. In order to survive, we need connections and relationships with other people. What happens when my relationships with other people threaten my survival? We got a problem, right? So then I learned, a lot of the panelists have discussed a lack of trust with other demographic groups. Black people not trusting white people not trusting black people, right? We also, in mental health diagnoses, we lose our attachment and our connection not only to other people, but also to ourselves. And I could not think of any other group of people aside from black people who that would be more fitting for. We don't have any access to our history in a meaningful way. There is even a decent amount of psychology about the trauma that language poses in educational systems for black kids. So it's kind of understood that black kids experience the same educational traumas with reading or learning or difficulties that a English second language child would experience, because there is genetic coding and instruction that resonates with your genes, with whatever spoken language is your primary language of origin. School can be particularly traumatizing for kids for various reasons, and I'm kind of getting off topic with that comment. But we were talking about education a lot here, so I decided to add it, okay? All right. So, mental health disorders don't occur outside of interpersonal dynamics, and there is a significant amount of neuroscience literature that dictates, even in neuroimaging and brain scanning, that we can't even pull up the scans of what's going on in people's brains without juxtaposing them to someone else. Okay? Developmental psychology, we don't even have a fully functioning brain until we're about 25, but also when kids are born, literally only the right hemisphere of their brain is online and active, and the second part of their brain doesn't come online until around age 2. So we basically are getting an imprint, and trauma is an imprint. Pleasant experiences are an imprint as well, but our brain's wired for survival, so it kind of sifts out, if I'm not being threatened, that's not really important, right? I gotta stay alive. That's kind of how our brain functions. Trauma is, I believe, a French word that means wound. I do know it means wound. I believe the etymology is French, right? And in therapy, we talk about 2 types of trauma. One type of trauma therapists will refer to as big T trauma, bad things that happened. And little t trauma is more insidious, good things that were supposed to happen that did not. Through the process of slavery, through the process of how we have learned to survive as a group of people, that has been our experience. We sometimes talk about Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, and then the trauma was already there. No one said, hey, we gotta come and repair this group of people. Even the field of psychology used to have a diagnosis called drapetomania, which is if you're a slave and you don't want to be a slave, you try to run away, we're gonna say you got a problem and we're gonna put this label on you. Not good. When we were freed as slaves, in my opinion, Black people went on to continue to raise their children as they were on the plantation. And we learned this because most of the slaves were kids, and we were bred like animals. So you don't have anything in your tool belt to reteach or restructure from your culture. And we're still in survival mode because we still have Jim Crow and loads of other things going on, right? The most important interbrain communication is emotion. Human beings are not thinking machines that feel. We are feeling machines that can think. Our primary state of being is to feel, is to sense. So when people say, I'm going to go to therapy, you're going to go talk about your feelings. Yes. We have been miseducated and misunderstood what it means to be human. I believe that human beings are different, and our genes are different. The genetic markers, there are a few that are different, but there are some good implications of like what that means to be a black person or a white person, this or that. But the thing that makes us human is our central nervous system. That is basically how our brains are wired to our bodies. Anybody ever heard of fight or flight?
Yeah.
It's fight or flight stuff, okay? Anatomy and physiology type of stuff. Basically, our prefrontal cortex is in the front of our brain here. That's our thinking portion of our brain. And then we have our emotional side of our brain. So when we have heavy emotions, the back of our brain is activated. And we have what is called the vagus nerve that is attached to the bottom of our brainstem where our emotions are tied. And that vagus nerve travels through the rest of our bodies and our major organs. The emotional part of our brain and the logical side of our brain function like a seesaw. They cannot be engaged at the same time. So if I'm emotionally triggered, or if I'm in a state of fight or flight and survival, or I'm in a state of shutdown, then I'm not thinking straight. I can't rationalize. I can't do anything. And it takes another human being to help to regulate that, which is, I would say, would be one of the main values to going to therapy, to get someone with a more regulated nervous system to help you walk through that process and to be able to hold space for you as you're triggered or going through whatever, okay? But functions like a seesaw, and it connects to all other parts of our body. We cannot have trauma and not live in a default state of fight and flight and freeze. So most people with trauma that's unresolved live in a state of survival. We're not even getting out of it. We're not, no matter how good it feels, and that's where you get some negative behaviors or like addictions and things like that. People are trying to cope with what's going on inside. Okay? Gotta look at my note cards. A constant diet, and you talked about this a little bit, and I think some of the other panelists, of crime and terror and cruelty will socialize us to be blunted towards sensitivities, and we will consider antisocial, destructive behavior to be normal, so we get numb to it, and we will basically develop a lack of sensitivity to human suffering. I do believe that has gone on historically in Freeport and all over the world. We're a microcosm of the world, of society, if you follow that frame of thought. Your schools, your churches, your families are a microcosm of the greater society. So if we're looking at ourselves as a sample of what's out there, how safe do we feel in the world? What do we want to pass down to our children? What do we want to pass down to other people's children? What type of society do we want to leave? If our genes are responding to the environment, what condition are we in today? If you've ever embarked on a healing journey of any sort, you know that healing is not linear. I like to describe it to clients as cyclical, like a spiral. a downward spiral, right? And you will continue to repeat old patterns over and over again until you learn the lesson. And then when you learn the lesson, you're going to get to a deeper level of healing. It's never over. You're going to get to a deeper level of healing. Those same things are going to come up, right? And you're going to see your progress of where you are. And you're going to go to a deeper level of healing. And you'll get new insights, and you'll see where you've progressed and where you haven't progressed. But if we haven't, we're going to spin the block, and we're going to get taught the same lesson over and over again. I do believe that's where society is. That's where we are as individuals. That's where we are as groups of people. I also think that if you've done some healing, healing is painful. It is not a comfortable, cushy experience. I know sometimes I see on Instagram, people are like bouncing through a field of flowers and they're on their healing journey and it's me season, and that is not healing. You know you're healing when you feel accountable to experience your pain. Your brain does not let you choose something else to do. You might say it's exhausting, it's tiring, I don't want to do this, but it is no other choice. I gotta feel my feels, right? And I like to say there's medicine in the pain. If you don't feel it, if you don't acknowledge that it's there, then you can't get the medicine. So, I'm gonna do a shameless plug. If I had an infomercial for therapy, it would be this. Like, you know, like people say, like, ask your doctor about Zoloft, right? Ask your therapist about a genogram. And a genogram is basically like a family tree that we do in therapy. You can put anything on it. You can put medical conditions, you can put educational experiences, you can put births, you can put deaths, you can put patterns of relationships on it, but it's a really good tool for therapy. And I think I try to convince most clients to do a genogram just because it's really helpful to see, have it all laid out. What patterns am I experiencing? How is this showing up? And then that gives us a foundation of what we can work with. So, that's what I got.
Thank you. So I want you to kind of keep in mind